Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Everyday Technologies to Address Behavior and Task Performance for Students with Developmental Disabilities. This presentation is being hosted by the Family Support Center of New Jersey and presented by Fred Chang, Director of Assistive Technology Services, Advancing Opportunities. While acknowledging the need for education around specific topics such as today's presentation, the Family Support Center of New Jersey also knows that families have many questions around their child's transition years. The Transition Matters website assists families and professionals in identifying resources to successfully transition your child or students with special needs to adulthood. Resources such as webinars, in-person workshops, and statewide and regional contact information are made available on this site. We encourage you to explore this site further and register for upcoming sessions. Before we begin, let's take a moment to go over how you can participate during today's web event. Everyone has their own control panel in the upper right corner of their screen that looks similar to the one here. Use the orange arrow to open or hide your control panel. To listen to the webinar, you have two audio options to choose from: mic and speakers, and telephone. If you can't hear well using the computer's speakers, you can elect to use your telephone to listen to today's session. In order to maintain the best sound quality possible, all but the presenter will be muted throughout the webinar. If you have questions or comments, you can submit them using the questions panel. And at this time, I would like to welcome Fred Chang. Welcome, Fred.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to thank you for taking the time out. I know it's not an easy thing to take the time out to learn about something new. I hope that there are people here who are already trying things out, because I think that you learn most when you try things out. I want to encourage you to find ways of getting a hold of technology to be able to try it out yourself. First, let me just introduce myself. Fred Chang, I'm the Director of Assistive Technology Services. I work for Advancing Opportunities, nonprofit serving people with disabilities throughout the state of New Jersey. Mostly what we're doing is on-site evaluations and training in assistive technology. We do work with people of all disabilities. We do have a service called the Technology Lending Center. So if people want to be able to borrow equipment, including iPods or iPads with specialized apps, they can do so through the Technology Lending Center. And you can find out more at our website, assistivetechnologycenter.org. Now, first thing I always like to ask is to think about, why should we bother looking at technology? Why not just have an aide do it, or have a parent do the task for the child? Well, we want to make sure that we're focusing on people's interests, not on their disability. We want to expand their job choices, their task choices, make sure that they can do things independently and not just relying on other people. I want to give a little example. This is actually an adult, but I think it's an example that is of the kind that you get when you're in transition. So this one comes from Dr. Tony Gentry, who's been working a lot on using different kinds of devices with people with developmental disabilities to help them to be independent in their tasks. This is about a young adult who has autism. He had a job where he was working in a restaurant. He was cleaning up. He was doing some prep work. He had different tasks throughout the day. When he was unsure what to do, he had these behaviors such that he would stand and rotate and just kind of not know what to do. The manager would constantly have to check in with them and let them know, okay, now we need you to do this. And so when Dr. Gentry worked with him, one of the things that they did was introduce a simple reminder tool to have him, basically an iPod Touch, a little electronic device with timed reminders to help him move from one task to the next. And this reduced the behaviors, helped him to feel comfortable with what he was doing, and to move on from one task without feeling like he wasn't sure what to do. Now, when we talk about the problem areas, what are the issues that are happening where you might be looking at some kind of assistive technology to help with behavior or being able to complete tasks? So there might be appointments or things that need to do, transitions and changes in the schedule. We know about that. Maybe they are unsure of the steps of a task. Okay, first I do this, then I do this. Travel training. Travel is a complex set of tasks. And so being able to travel independently. And just generally dealing with different behaviors which might not be appropriate depending on the setting. And so how do we find ways for the person to be able to calm themselves or find another behavior which is more acceptable? So what are the options when it comes to different kinds of technology that someone might use? Well, we do like to start with what people have. So if someone has a cell phone, we'll look at that first. Is there some sort of simple reminder that could be used to help the person with the task that they're doing? But in this case, when you're using a simple cell phone, generally it just beeps at you, and you need to know what the beeping means. The other drawback is without having a touch screen, it means that you generally have to go through more steps. You have to have more button presses in order to accomplish a task. Next up is using something like an iPhone. So when we still have the iPod Touch, it's nice that Apple still makes this available. It's relatively inexpensive. You're talking about $200 for a device. It's basically an iPhone, just without the phone plan. So it's a nice way to be able to try out the use of multimedia. It has built-in cameras, a built-in microphone. So it can provide a lot of different kinds of information and support to someone. Of course, you also have an iPad, which has larger buttons and larger text. It has basically the same capabilities of the iPod Touch, but it has a bigger speaker, so it can be louder if necessary, and it still has the built-in cameras and microphones. Basically, there are lots of different, any kind of devices someone might already have. We're going to look at that first, because they have a lot of things that are already built in. Calendars, to-do lists. Sometimes people don't need very sophisticated or customized apps. A voice recorder, contacts list, the ability to access photos and videos. Sometimes just being able to look through a list of photos is enough to help someone through a task. Okay. So why do we use these everyday technologies? The main reason is because it's easy to access them. They're out there. The other is that whenever you're introducing technology to someone, a major issue is support. Who's going to help that person be able to use that technology? Well, if we're using everyday technologies, then there are family members and people in the community who know how to use those devices already. And finally, it's more socially acceptable. They don't have to have some sort of specialized device. They're just using what everyone else has. Now, I have a question here. This is going to give us some practice with using the chat window. If you don't have access to the chat window, if you're just listening, that's fine. But for those people who do, I'm curious, how many people know someone who has a developmental disability who already has access to a cell phone, a smartphone, an iPod, or an iPad? And when you respond in the chat window, just let us know what kind of device that they have. And we'll come back to that to see what people have. Okay, so certainly when we're talking about people remembering something that needs to happen at a certain time, then we do start with built-in calendars and to-do lists. There is built-in audio recording that we could use to make it easy to be able to hear things. But sometimes the standard appointments, what those rely on is, again, beeping reminders that someone has to make sense of, and text that maybe someone understands, but if maybe somebody doesn't understand the text or has trouble reading the text. That's when we start to look at specialized apps. Okay? So there are a bunch of different apps out there, and what I'd say is that, well, I'm going to show you some sample of apps. In the end, if there's an app that your school is using or that you're already familiar with that has some of the basic functionality, you can use those. People have made prompting and videos and photo apps just using PowerPoint, as a starting place. So there are lots of ways of doing this even without a specialized app. But these are fairly inexpensive. So if someone has a portable device, then it can make it easier to use these. So for example, this is the picture scheduler. This is a little picture of that. It's nice in that, if this is a little view of how you edit it, it's very simple. You basically put a name to it, and then you can attach either audio or video. Now these have reminders that can be set by time, okay, which is kind of nice. So if I show you, let me just show you a little example there. I'm going to switch to my webcam. Okay. Let's see. Now, right now we're looking at the picture scheduler. If I have a list here, I have a list of things to do. If I want to be able to go through those, I can have audio attached to it so that it's not only giving me a picture of what needs to happen next, but it gives me some audio. So I don't know if you're hearing that well, but that's basically some audio so that you can, if you don't understand the words, it's okay. You can still have the audio support. Okay. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to switch back to the screen. Now, following steps, sometimes people really need to not only know that something is happening at a certain time, but they need help with being able to follow steps in a process. Okay. And so there are apps out there that have videos and audio recording. Okay. People, as I said, you can use something as simple as PowerPoint. But there are some other apps. For example, I would mention the Can Plan is a certain app that I've been using lately. And I'll see if I can show that on my webcam too. So this is and I'll describe it too. This is the Can Plan app. It basically gives you a way of creating steps in a process. Okay. Now I could just have a simple reminder that is just going to show a single picture. Okay. But if I want to, I can have multiple steps. Now I'm not sure if you could hear the audio there, but it has an option of having a computer voice. So you simply write what the instructions are. In this case, it's make coffee. And then if you want to go through all the steps involved, you can have pictures for each step, right? And then the person has a choice. If the person can swipe, then you can have the person swipe. Okay. Obviously, you want to really customize these. That's what's important with any of these. You want to be able to have pictures that make sense, that are of the actual equipment that people are using in the environment that they're using them. Now, this app can either use the computer reading the text that you type in as instructions, or you can record your own voice. So I was recording my own voice, which might be a little bit easier to understand and might be just a little bit more friendly. So it's fairly simple to edit, simple to use. It provides a checklist. It is not something that is about time, right? It is not about how that this needs to happen at a certain time. But it does have audio, so either text-to-speech or recording. and it has pictures or video, which is nice. I want to show you how relatively easy it is to edit and to make things in this. Let me switch back to the webcam a little bit. If I want to edit, I can tap on a certain process. So this one is now washing clothes. And I've already got the steps in here. I can tap on the item. I can choose a photo or video. I can take a picture right now, or I can choose an existing picture if I already have one. Oh, that is for recording audio. So that's that. When you hit the audio, it'll immediately start to record. And then when you scroll down through the steps, you'll see that at the bottom there's add a step. I'm sorry, this is a sample, so it's not allowing me to modify it, but that is the way that you would do it. Okay. You can actually add a time for this. This is something that if you have something happening on a regular basis, you can make it. It doesn't add it to your calendar, but it has its own reminder that can pop up. Okay. Now, so that was an example, and again, anything that I'm showing you, it's really just one app. There are lots of apps that can do similar, basically have similar features. I'm just showing you some of the ones, like one sample of each type, just so you have a sense of what's possible, and just to let you know which ones I've been using lately. But there are lots of them out there, and if you hear about one, try it out. A lot of these, basically all the ones that I've been showing you so far are, in the range of $10, less than that. These are not very expensive, so it makes it easier. Now the next example I'm going to talk about is more complex, I have to say. But it does a lot, and so it's kind of unique. There is an app called Wayfinder. It is not an iPhone app, though. It is by a company called AbleLink. And it basically gives someone support as they're going on public transportation. Okay, so the idea is to help someone to learn to take public transportation with support from the app instead of having to have a person with them all the time. Okay. Now maybe there are people, certainly there are people who are always going to need to have a person with them all the time. But there are plenty of people who can fade from that. Would be fine if they got on the bus, if they had some support to make sure that they're going in the right place, that they're getting off at the right time. And so this app is an attempt at meeting that need. As I said, it's specialized. It is Android only. It works with the phone's GPS, so it requires a phone or a cell plan. So it can work on an Android phone or an Android tablet, but it does require constant connection to the cell service, because it not only is going through steps, it is aware of where you are. When you create a travel plan, you actually carry it with you and tell it where specific places are. So it knows when you're in the right place and when you're not in the right place. So for example, you can set it up so that at certain stops, like if you know a bus has certain stops, you can tell it when you get to this place, play a reminder to the person, don't get off yet, it's not your stop. Okay, so the intelligence is there in the phones. It's just a matter of having apps that tap into that intelligence and give the feedback that the person needs. And of course, it requires you to customize the app for each ride, for each person. Okay. So I can't show that, but I did want to point out a resource because I think that it's helpful if we can, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about it. I think I mentioned our website assistivtechnologycenter.org. If you go to the YouTube channel, there's a little YouTube link in the upper right. Then you'll come to our YouTube channel. And basically, this YouTube channel is meant to be set up having about people with disabilities using their assistive technology. So it's videos of people with disabilities using different kinds of assistive technology. The first section is AT Stories. These are videos that we've created here in New Jersey. But then we have videos from all over YouTube, just categorized to make it easier for people to find it. So there's Introduction to Assistive Technology, Learning Disabilities, Developmental Disabilities, Mobility-Oriented Disabilities, Vision, and then we have videos by age, so if people want to see elementary age, middle, high school, college, adult, and different other categories that people are interested in. But I wanted to show you the developmental disabilities category. Okay, so this one I did add in the Can Plan app. It's a little video of the Can Plan app if you wanted to see that in action. And this smart travel program featuring AbleLink's Wayfinder system. This is a video that gives you a sense. Fortunately, we tested this out. We can't show videos on the webinar. It just doesn't work. But this basically is a video that shows you the actual use of the Wayfinder system, which I think is more useful than just hearing me talk about it. So again, if you go to our website or YouTube channel, you can find those videos. Okay. Oh, you know what? Before I move on, I wanted to get back to the question that I asked before. Melanie or Yvonne, I don't know if you have gotten feedback in the chat window as far as the kinds of devices that people have.
Hey Fred, it's Melanie. So we actually had a lot of response to that question. Most of the people are using the iPad. We did have a good percent also using the iPhone or smartphones, and a few people are using laptops also.
Okay, good. And that gives me a sense of it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of Android devices out there, but in the disability world, most of the apps that people have created are iPad or iPhone based, and so that's why a lot of us have iPhones or iPads. This Wayfinder app is unusual. Let's put it that way. I should also say that whereas everything else we've talked about is relatively inexpensive, we're talking in the range of $10, $20 maybe, once you have the device. This Wayfinder app costs a lot more. This is much more, I guess there just are a lot fewer people who use this, and it did take a lot of development work on their part. So the app itself, if you just bought the app, if you already had a device, I believe it's $500. And if you wanted to purchase it with, if you wanted to purchase it with a device, like if you don't already have an Android phone or an Android tablet, it's $1,000. But like I said, being able to travel independently is a pretty major issue in my mind. We would be willing to, we would talk to the company about this, getting one of these, if people wanted to try it out through the Technology Lending Center. Again, the purpose of the Technology Lending Center, if I go to that section of our website, is for people to borrow technology, to see if it would work, to see if it would be helpful before purchasing anything. And so the more expensive something is, the more important it is to do a trial of it before purchasing. Okay, so getting back to behavioral support. Now there are some strategies that have been used in the use of video when it comes to helping people to be able to diminish their behaviors that are just not acceptable in the general public or whatever environment they're in. And this is not so much in the realm of assistive technology, but more in behavioral supports. The way I see it, every profession out there, every area of specialty can use technology. So a special ed teacher can use technology in the work that they do. A speech therapist can use technology in the work that they do. Well, behaviorists and people who are coaching people on behavior can use technology in the work that they do. So in these examples, what people are doing is recording video, for example, as a way of coaching the person. Okay, sometimes it's helpful to have another person, to hear another person saying what the coaching is to the person. Okay, so I'll give you an example. It was a young lady who was calling her mother. This was someone who's in transition age, doing work experiences. Calling her mother like 20 times a day. She had just extreme anxiety, and it was just constant. It was very difficult for the mom. But when they took a look at what she was calling about, it was often the same topics, and what the mom was coaching her was kind of the same things over and over again, a few variations. And so what they did was they recorded the mom a few different kinds of advice that she was giving, and kept that on the girl's iPod Touch, and gave them names that made sense for the situation. So if you're feeling this way, or if you're feeling that way, and they coached her. Of course, there's a person who's with her, coached her that when she's feeling the need to call her mom, coaching her on which videos she might watch. And this, over several weeks of doing this, reduced the amount of phone calls to just a few a day. So it's not so much that this was so sophisticated technology. It was just a matter of figuring out how can we use technology in a creative way to do what a person might do otherwise. Now I should say when it comes to trying to use devices, I know there are a lot of practical issues, and maybe that might be some of the questions people have. I don't know. Sometimes when you're doing something, you can't be holding a device. So there are belt clips, armbands to hold devices, especially smaller devices, to keep your hands free. I've even seen people have neck loops, so that it's kind of hanging on their neck. You can get devices that have speakers built in if you really need better audio. And the other issue, of course, is protective cases. Everyone knows about OtterBox cases. Those are some of the strongest cases out there. It is, of course, an issue when you're using iPads and devices that this is a Swiss Army knife kind of device, right? So this device can do lots of different things, including play games and play YouTube videos. I should say that there are ways of quieting that. Of course, you can put apps in folders. That's one way of quieting the screen. But it is also possible, ever since iOS 6, to lock out the home button, basically to make it so you're locked into a certain app. Okay, and I wanted to show you briefly how you do that on the webcam. And again, I'll talk it through if anyone can't see what I'm showing you here. So this is a very handy feature that Apple built into the iPhone, which is nice. If you go into the settings on your phone, there is a feature section called General. And inside of General, there's something called Accessibility. Okay. Accessibility has there's a lot of different supports here for people with disabilities. Okay. But the one that we're interested in is called Guided Access. Okay. So Guided Access will keep the phone in a single app, okay, unless you put in a passcode. This can be handy for anyone with a young child who's handling your phone. but it's especially useful for people who have disabilities and maybe get distracted easily and they end up out of their app. So if I just to demonstrate this, if I'm in an app, let's get to let's see, this is another travel app, iTravel, which is kind of a simple app for showing audio and video of or audio and pictures of traveling. If I wanted to have this person not leave this app, I can triple click the home button to turn on guided access. Okay, and it says, are you sure you want to do that? Yes, I want to start. Okay, now in order to do that, I've got to enter a passcode. Okay, let's see if I remember my passcode. Okay, so now it says guided access start. So now I can use this app. I can do everything in this app. But if I hit the home button, it says no, you can't. You can't exit. It says guided access is on. So in order to turn it off, I have to triple click, and then I've got to put my passcode in again. Okay. Okay. Now I can end guided access and be able to exit out of there. Okay. Now I wanted to mention one other type of behavior modification kind of use of video. This actually relates more to what we were talking before about, oh wait, sorry, get to the right one, behavioral supports. There's a strategy called video self-modeling, and you can Google that to look up the research on it. The idea is the use of video to model for the person what we expect from them. You've seen this in a lot of ways. You know, we model for each other, and we try to show the person what we're expecting. We might show pictures. Video self-modeling is a little different. It's taking a video of the person doing the task in the way that we want them to do it, and then reviewing that video with them. Okay, maybe they review it themselves. Maybe there's some audio you record over it if you think that would be helpful. Some prompts over what they're doing. There's something that can be very powerful about watching yourself doing something. Now you might say, well, how do I take a video of the person doing a task when they won't do it? They won't do it, or they don't. It's not easy to get them to do it. Well, or they're not doing it in the way that I need them to do it. Well, that can happen in creative editing. So if you want the person to be able to get a tray in the lunch line and be able to bring it to a certain spot and without having distracting behaviors, then you can video them doing it a bunch of times. And when they do something that you don't want them to do, you edit that out. And you basically stitch together so that it looks fairly seamless. And so the person has a sense of, okay, this is what we're expecting. This is what we're wanting from you. And they can view that and use that as a guide for themselves. Okay. Let's see. I want to talk just briefly about how we get to the point of figuring out what kind of accommodation might make sense for any one person. I know that we've thrown a bunch of examples out there, but in the end, we don't just start with the technology. You know, we start with understanding the person. We use a framework that's pretty common in assistive technology, the SETT Framework. S stands for the skills of the person or the person's abilities. E for environment. Where are they? Where are they doing this task? T is for the task itself, to define really well what it is that they're having trouble doing, that we're looking for technology to help with. And finally, the fourth T is for tools. What are the possible tools that might help this person to do that task? Okay. So the skills of the individual, the first S in SETT, is really in understanding a person in totality. This is really important because, for example, if I know that certain things that happen are going to set this person off, I need to know that so that whatever accommodations we come up with are not going to contribute to the person's negative behaviors. Right? I need to know what are the things that work for the person. For example, is it more helpful for them to hear their own voice, or to hear their parents' voice, or to hear another student's voice? If we're recording tasks, what is going to be most effective in helping that person to attend? The environment that they're in, it really varies what kind of technology will work depending on the environment. Some technologies will be appropriate for school, and some might be more appropriate for home or community. So it's not always true that the same solution will work everywhere. So we have to know where they're going to be and what supports are available in that environment. So for example, in school, part of understanding the environment is understanding the staff that are supporting the student. Their comfort level with technology, the technology that they already use, that affects a lot of what we end up recommending, because if we recommend something that they're not comfortable with, then it's very possible that it won't end up getting used. We're going to at least start with the things that they're more comfortable with. The first T, tasks. A lot of times I say, SETT, we put SETT because we can say it. We put it in that order because we can say it. But tasks really does come first. We need to understand what is it that the person is doing. Specifically, what is it that they're doing that we're trying to modify or be able to help them to be able to do independently. This is more of a job-oriented set of tasks. But really, whatever task the person is doing that they're having trouble doing, we need to be specific. So for example, if someone comes to me and just says, well, he has these behaviors we're trying to reduce in general, that's not really what I want to know. I want to know, what is it that he's trying to do, or you would like him to do, that he's having trouble with? So for example, is it being able to get in the lunch line and put his tray in and be able to follow the line and get to the end with his food? Okay, that's pretty specific. And so that's the level of specificity we need in order to know what kind of accommodations might make sense. And the final T is for tools. What are the different kinds of technology or adaptations that we might use with the person? But I'd like to point out that everything else that came first, it doesn't require any knowledge of assistive technology. You know a lot if you know the person and you know what you're trying to accomplish. The last T, tools, can be something you explore. We always do start with thinking in terms of a hierarchy. So starting with, at the bottom of the hierarchy, just finding an alternative way to complete a task. And this is what you guys do all the time, I'm sure. If somebody has trouble doing something, is there another way they can do it? But the next step is to use commercially available products. And that's why we talked about everyday technologies. Right? We want to use what's commercially available. Up the ladder, if we're going to modify, in this case, if we're talking about iPads and iPhones, we might use some sort of specialized app instead of just the regular apps that it comes with. But finally, sometimes we do have to actually make things. Now, we haven't made apps yet, but there are some things physically we'll make if a person especially has a physical disability and needs some modifications in order to do a task. So we always assess the person's needs, tasks, and environments. Okay. You've got to learn the devices and the apps in order to figure out what might work for the person. You have to provide training. A lot of times people will come to us and they think that all they're trying to do is evaluate to find the right technology. But in the end, that's just half the battle. After doing an evaluation and doing a trial, a trial in the real world, then we have to get into the training, the implementation. And that can really make or break an accommodation. If we're talking about daily routines, we need to make sure to include whatever we're doing into their daily routine. integrate it. And finally, we want to do follow-up to make sure that things are working and diminish supports over time so the person can become more and more independent. I just want to let you know again about our website, assistivetechnologycenter.org. If you're looking to keep in touch, if you're looking to keep up on assistive technology, we do have a newsletter. We have case studies on there, and you can even subscribe to our blog if you want to get emails each time we post something on our blog. And I mentioned before the YouTube channel. That's really good if you just want to get a sense of what's possible and you want to see people using some of the technology. And by the way, if you find videos that we don't have on our YouTube channel, please let me know. We're adding to it all the time, and we like to add videos that are out there that are really good and really helpful. Usually when we're working with people, we're working with people either through DVR or DDD, or now through DCF. So certainly, if you're looking for individualized support, I do want to encourage you to contact your counselor or your case manager, or in DCF's case, contacting Perform Care to be able to get some more individualized support. But if you're looking for that, you can also just feel free to call us, because sometimes it's difficult to navigate the system to figure out how to get to us. So that's the PowerPoint that I had. I wanted to give a chance to answer any questions. So Melanie, do we have some questions?
Hi Fred, this is Yvonne. Yes, we did have some questions that came in. So first off, we were talking a little bit about devices. When would you suggest using an iPod Touch compared to the iPad?
That's a really good question. So really it's about, well, first of all, I would say that in making any decision about devices, it's basically going through the SETT process. So it's about the person. S can stand for student or skills. So it's about the person. It's about the environment that they're in, the task that they're trying to do. So it's in understanding all those things that we choose the tools. So let me give you an example. So for example, for the person, if the person needs things larger, then that's one indication to use an iPad instead. If the person needs things very portable, in other words, that they need to have it in their pocket, then that's an indication for an iPod Touch or some device like that. As far as the environment, is it something that they need to do moving from place to place? Because then we do usually think of something smaller, just to make it easier. But on the other hand, if the person, again, has low vision or really needs things big, we'll find a way of carrying around the iPad. We'll find a way of doing that. And then when it comes to the task, that affects, because for example, if it absolutely needs to be, it needs to be a device that someone is wearing, then that's most likely going to be an iPod Touch, because it's got to be small enough, even if it's on their arm or around their neck. So for example, if they're going about their day and they need reminders, they need this thing to beep at them and play a recording or something like that, and it can't be sitting somewhere else. That's not going to work. So basically, I'm going to go back to my SETT process and trying to figure out what device is appropriate.
Thank you so much, Fred. And speaking about other devices, one parent was expressing that she likes the idea of the smartwatches that sync to your phone, and she feels that it's newer technology. Do you happen to have any experience or suggestions for using this device for reminders, scheduling purposes?
That's a really good question. So we have used a few different kinds of watches in the past. We don't have an Apple Watch, and I've been looking at that and seeing how we might use that. The Apple Watch has to be paired, has to have an iPhone that it's working with. In any case, it's almost like an external display, and so that's appropriate if you know the person already has an iPhone. But there are some other reminder watches, very simple reminder watches. and they, sometimes they come and go. They're not always around. We used one some years ago called the Timex Data Link. Let's see if it's still around. Data Link. Because it had the capability of, let's see, it had the capability of being able to synchronize. This is so old that it has the word PDA in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know this technology is old. But it had the capability of synchronizing with Microsoft Outlook. And so if the person could read, then there was the benefit of being able to have actual messages on there. Right? And you could actually customize it yourself, because if you can use Outlook, you could just go into their calendar, put in whatever reminders you needed, and then you'd have to, of course, it has a cable that syncs up with the computer. Then you could have the person have those reminders. There are a few others out there, some more simple, that simply beep. And sometimes that's all you need.
Perfect. There were a couple other questions that came in regards to apps. A parent was wondering, is there a master list of apps that can be accessed that are organized by function that would make it a little bit easier to find compared to having to browse through the App Store?
Yeah, there are so many apps out there, and so much of it is just working with it over time to get a sense of which ones are useful. The thing is that I tell you what I can do. What we could do is forward some of the best websites. There isn't one that I know of that is specific to behavior and this sort of task completion kind of list. I haven't seen that, but there are certainly listings of apps that are specific to special ed and people with disabilities, students with disabilities. So we could certainly send over some of the best ones that are out there.
Okay, great. And is there a way, we were talking about guided access, is there a way to limit use to 3 or 4 apps only?
That I don't know of. The guided access only works on a single app at a time. So what you would need to do is actually remove all the other apps, my guess is, in order to not have access to any other apps than just a few apps.
Okay. And this parent was discussing that their child uses a smartphone for vocational and independence purposes, and they've tried to make them aware that this is an educational tool, not a toy. Is there a way to block internet access, specifically YouTube?
Well, you can turn off Wi-Fi and even cell phone access if you want. That's probably the easiest way. Of course, it can't. I don't think there's any way of locking that though. So if the person knows how to turn it back on, they can. Of course, you can lock them into. Let's see. If you swipe up, if we're talking about iPhones here, if you swipe up, then you've got the control panel where you can, for example, turn off Wi-Fi, turn off Bluetooth. But then certainly the person can just go in and turn them on again. I could put in airplane mode, and so it not only is Wi-Fi off, but also cell phone service is off. The only way I could think of locking that would be to put in guided access, and so that way, if guided access is on, then they're locked into a certain app, and they can't get out in order to turn on Wi-Fi.
Okay, great. And Fred, there was a lot of interest in the various apps that you had mentioned throughout the session. Would it be possible for you to email the names of the apps so that we can forward this info to our attendees?
Absolutely. It's true. I didn't make it was certainly the PowerPoint itself. We can share that, and maybe that would be good. But we could make just a simple list, and hopefully, what I'll do. Part of the reason I want to send you a list of other websites that do a good job of reviewing apps, I want to check them again, because sometimes one that I used some years ago is out of date and not useful.
Sure.
You have to keep checking up on them. So let me take a look, because if there's a good set of apps that includes more than just the ones I mentioned, but has a category for task completion, vocational-oriented kind of apps, and that would be useful.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. And we have just a couple more questions that came in. One parent was asking if it's possible to limit the iPad by time. They would like it to turn off after a specific amount of time.
I'm sure that's possible. It's not in the accessibility settings, but I don't know. But if anyone in the audience knows, if you could put it in the chat window. I bet you I'm sure there's a way of doing that, because again, it's not so much about people with disabilities. It's like anyone who has kids using a device. So there must be a way. I'm just not sure off the top of my head.
Brad, it's Melanie.
Hey, Melanie.
So there is actually, I do not have the name of it, but I will look it up. There is a timer app, I believe, that may lock the iPad. I will try to find that name and send it to you, just so you can look at that to see if it would suit the purpose, and then we'll forward it to the attendees if that's valuable, information.
Yeah, maybe we could have one email of a bunch of follow-up information.
Absolutely. We'll try to put all the follow-up resources that you're going to send, along with the PowerPoint, in an email format with the recording of the webinar, probably in about a week, for everyone in attendance today.
Okay, and Fred, I think we have just one more question that came in. Do you have any experience with training schools to use these apps with their students? This parent has a child that has assistive technology written into her IEP, but the school doesn't necessarily know how to use the app suggested in her assistive technology assessment. Sure.
Well, I have to say that we have more experience working with adults, and that's why you'll notice that this PowerPoint was kind of more oriented towards adults and adult-oriented activities, because we have more experience with that. We've worked with lots of school districts, but usually on very academically oriented things, reading and writing, and not so much on task and behavior and kind of transition kind of issues. So we'd be happy to work with them on it. I just think that there's so much that's possible that we're not doing. So it's something we would really like to work on. But no, we really haven't had districts asking about it.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, Fred, this information that you provided our families today has been extremely helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Yes, and on behalf of Family Support Center of New Jersey, I'd just like to thank our attendees for joining us today. Again, Fred, thank you. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful day today.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. You too.